Things started a little rocky for Caleb Williams at Chicago Bears OTAs, but then things got a lot better in week 2. It's a reminder that it's not always going to be smooth for a rookie quarterback, and we shouldn't overreact to any of the bumps along the way.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on all of your favorite social media platforms at Locked On Bears, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On the show today, we'll check in on Caleb Williams' development, along with the rest of this offense through the voluntary OTAs, where there have been ups and there have been downs, and that's all a part of the process here. It's very normal for a rookie quarterback, and now things are swinging on the upward trend now, and that's great, and things might still swing back down, and that's all how this process works. But we'll get into some of the specifics on what the Bears coaching staff has been seeing from Caleb Williams and where he's making that progress. We'll also hear about the implementation of DeAndre Swift in this Bears backfield, what Chicago and this staff is looking for him to do and add to this offense that they didn't already have in the running backs that were here last season. And we'll wrap up getting some Bears reaction to being on Hard Knocks and how the coaching staff and team is approaching a little bit more of an invasive camera presence than what training camp might normally bring. But with OTAs, we only get snippets of access to what the players are doing. There are only a couple of practices are open to the media, so we don't get to see everything. And we end up seeing some of Caleb Williams struggling and then some of Caleb Williams playing really well. And all of that is to remind us that this is a very normal part of the process, that we should be encouraged by the good moments and not too worried about the moments when there are mistakes or when things aren't everything on the same page, when there's some, rough around the edges times, because this is the time of year to make those mistakes. This is the time of year to learn and grow and push new things. Even though at OTAs, it's not full contact, it's not full pads, it's not directly replicable from like OTAs practice to in-game situations, but there are still aspects of quarterbacking and every position that you can work on in this process. And for Caleb Williams at OTAs so far, it has been footwork. That's been something that they can look at and say, okay, yeah, there's not a real pass rush, and maybe coverage isn't as physical because there's not pads and there's not as much contact, but still, we can work on making sure that timing is precise and that the quarterback's physical tools and mechanics line up with the plays that they want. And that's an area that Matt Eberflus highlighted specifically, where he saw the need for progress from Caleb and that development right in front of his eyes.
You mentioned Caleb's footwork. What are some of the things that you've been watching the last couple of weeks in terms of things you need him to clean up, and how has he done that?
Just understanding the plays and how his feet, are married to those plays. Albeit if it's just normal situations, if it's play action pass or in the red zone when it quickens up a little bit. So I think he really improved on that this week, and you could see the ball, coming out of his hand pretty live when his feet were right.
Since we don't see all the practices, obviously. So today's practice, which looked pretty good, how was today relative to other days? Like, was this one of his best?
It was good. It was good. People always talk about success, and they think it's a straight line, from here going that way. And success really isn't that, as we know, because there's bumps in the road, right? So it's always going to be here and then a little bit wavy, right? And then it'll be here. It's going to be like that. And that's really what a football season is, or even a individual career is like that. So there was some learning moments in there during the course of the week. It wasn't perfect, but again, there was progress. And I thought this week was better than last week, and that's the positive.
There's a couple different aspects of quarterback footwork that come into play here that I think do a good job of illustrating where OTAs, as a relatively light practice schedule, can still have value, especially though for a rookie quarterback, where what Matt Eberflus is talking about with footwork is lining it up with the timing of plays, which is slightly different than purely the throwing mechanics of footwork, right? So on the one hand, like we saw Justin Fields, and I remember certainly Mitch Trubisky before him, have issues with some of the throwing mechanics of footwork where, you know, the stability of their base, you know, when they're throwing shifting their weight from their back foot to the front foot, how close those feet are together, what direction the toes are pointed in, like the basic mechanics of quarterbacking that can often shape the accuracy of your throw. Like that is an important part of footwork and where they are in the pocket and how crisp they are. But another aspect of footwork that I think Matt Eberflus is specifying here with Caleb is more about timing and rhythm in play structure, in that whether you're under center or in the shotgun, depending on whether you're taking a 3-step drop, a 5-step drop, a 7-step drop, whatever the play calls for, oftentimes in these types of offenses, the timing and depth of routes are linked to the drop back. So that, okay, you might have, 4 receivers running routes and maybe a running back is staying in to pass protect. And so there might be one route that's a short little curl route, right? And so maybe by your 3rd step, that curl route is that depth. And you would say, okay, if you get to that 3rd step and you know that curl route is where you want to go here, then you can just pull it and fire it. And then, okay, maybe by your 5th step in your drop back, that means the next deeper route is making its break. Maybe it's a post route or a slant or something. Like, okay, by your 5th step, that's breaking open towards the middle of the field. And then by your 7th step, then maybe a deeper route downfield, right? There's different timings of like, okay, depending on where you are in your drop back, and then maybe it's your 5 steps and then a hitch. And on that hitch, that's when your double move, the post corner or the stop and go route, like, okay, 5-step, hitch, step up, then throw. That should be the timing for that route, for that receiver to get 10 yards downfield, fake his move, and then make his second move, right? Everything is linked up to the timing of that footwork. And so that requires Caleb Williams to take those steps at roughly the same speed and pace and crispness every time he runs those individual plays, and then sync that up to how fast the receivers are running their routes. And that obviously different receivers have different speeds, and it depends on what route they're running, but kind of get a sense of, okay, I know that Keenan Allen might need an extra beat to get there versus, Roman Uze might be there a little bit faster, or however it might work for those receivers. Like, that's all the little nuances of like timing in the footwork, not just like the mechanics, but actually like literally the timing for each individual play that Caleb Williams can be working on at this stage of OTAs. That's not quite something he can just do, on his own. You can work on throwing mechanics with your quarterback's coach in terms of the direction of the feet and the spacing of the feet and the things we talked about at the beginning. But like that full offense, play call, timing, rhythm, that's an OTAs get everyone together type of practice that you can only get those reps in when everyone is there, that you can build that connection of that timing there. And that's something that clearly Matt Eberflus is seeing progress in, and where there's a lot of value to these OTAs for Caleb Williams. The idea being then that you put all these great weapons around him, and then that timing is even more effective, or even when the timing is off a little bit, the players are good enough to overcome that. And the Bears certainly see DeAndre Swift as being a big part of that. We talk so much about the big 3 wide receivers and, of course, the tight end depth, but DeAndre Swift is here to play a big role in this Bears offense as well. So we'll hear from Matt Eberflus about why Swift in particular and why they invested at that position at the beginning of free agency next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now is a great time to get started on FanDuel, because certainly it's winner's take all time in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's an extra $150 you can use to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So you bet $5 on anything. The NHL, the Stanley Cup Final is set. You've got certainly Major League Baseball season. The NBA Finals are coming up here as well. Like, everything's coming together here. You bet $5 on anything. If your bet is correct, not only do you get the winnings from your $5 bet, but you get an extra $150 on top of that you can use to bet on Bears games, lines for week 1, and then also against the Jaguars in London, Caleb Williams' stats, Roman Dunze's stats, props, and so much more. So, to claim your $150 in bonus bets, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. DeAndre Swift was brought to Chicago to be a significant part of this Bears offense. You don't sign a running back on day 1 of free agency to a significant contract. I guess I don't know if you count it as a top of the market contract, but a significant contract nonetheless, more than you have been paying running backs in Chicago for quite some time, if they don't envision him being more than just, your lead running back here. But it's about a holistic role in this offense of being more than just a 1,000-yard rusher. Like, a 1,000-yard rusher is the starting point for DeAndre Swift at 3 years, $24 million. His year 1 cap hit's a little bit lower, but still, the size of the contract was not insignificant, was a important investment in the running back position. And so that means being the go-to guy to get carries. But for the Bears, the signing of Swift in particular, as opposed to other guys who were available on the market, was about expanding what they could get out of the running back position. And the way Matt Eberflus talks about this, to me, also sends a message of not only, okay, here's what we're excited about DeAndre Swift being capable of, but also, here's what we thought our other running backs under contract, who are very talented, Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson, etc., are not exactly capable of, or not as capable of as DeAndre Swift.
Do you have a sense of what DeAndre Swift can mean for a rookie quarterback and the importance of this season for him?
Yeah, DeAndre's looked really good during this offseason. He's obviously, you guys know, he's very quick. He's a weapon out of the backfield, which is outstanding for our passing game. And it's going to create some mismatches for us. And he can do a lot of things from the backfield. We can split him out wide and run the full route cheese. So he's exciting to watch.
As you looked at the running back options out there this offseason, what really struck you? You guys moved quickly for DeAndre. What really struck you about him versus some of the other guys and what he could really bring to this?
Yeah, just much of the same. Just the weapon back. We really needed that guy that could really operate on third down and even on first and second down and be a weapon in the deep part of the field and the short part of the field and be able to take it the distance. And he's got a lot of gas.
So clearly, the receiving ability, third down ability of DeAndre Swift was perhaps, I don't know if I'd say the primary motivator for the Bears, but like clearly that was the differentiating factor that Matt Eberflus talks about there, right? The phrase is, we needed a guy who can be a playmaker on third down in the passing game, which implies they needed that because they didn't already have that, because we haven't seen Khalil Herbert be that as a receiver, and Roschon Johnson certainly has shown some ability as a receiver out of the backfield and as a pass protector, but Eberflus was specific in talking about how Swift is a guy that, we saw the Eagles do it last year, line him up at wide receiver or in the slot and run a full route tree or pretty darn close to a full route tree, a full enough route tree that's a legitimate running back receiver weapon out of the backfield, and not just out of the backfield, but who can start out of the backfield and then motion out wide and offer you a different kind of threat there. But what that also makes me think about is kind of what we talked about when they first signed DeAndre Swift. I think I got some pushback for being a little bit critical of the signing, feeling like, okay, Swift's a good player, but the running back position in Chicago was already, there's talent here, right? Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson are very good running backs. Neither one is as good as DeAndre Swift, but the Bears had other needs that were more pressing than running back. Like, Swift adds to the running back room, but I've long felt like they would have rather used that $8 million a year somewhere else, center, defensive line, etc. And so with someone like DeAndre Swift, his primary value to the Bears, or the thing that they really felt like they needed, was that third down pass catching ability. So why not, instead of spending $8 million a year on DeAndre Swift, go out and spend less money on someone who has that third down pass catching ability, but won't cost you as much and maybe isn't as good of a 1,000-yard runner lead back, but like that's what Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson can help you do. Because that's the thing. It's like, okay, you're paying Swift $8 million a year. So you're expecting him to be your 1,000-yard rusher, right? Okay, like he's going to be your lead back and a guy who rushed for 1,000 yards last year for the Eagles, sure. And he's also going to be your third down back and your primary pass catcher out of the backfield. So does that leave any snaps for Khalil Herbert? Does that leave any snaps for Roschon Johnson? I mean, occasionally if DeAndre Swift needs a break, you know, like if he just needs a breather or whatever, like is that what we're relegating Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson to? Like it doesn't feel like that's utilizing their talents best. Like clearly Herbert is not that great of a receiver and not that great of a pass blocker, but he's a good runner. So like it feels like a waste to not be able to utilize that running ability. So then, okay, you're going to play Khalil Herbert on like first and second down and just not use him on third downs. Okay, but then where's DeAndre Swift? How many carries is DeAndre Swift going to get? Like he's not going to be just a third down back, but it feels like that's what the Bears really wanted here was a third down back. Someone who can be a pass catching weapon there. Like to me, it's hard to feel like, okay, paying DeAndre Swift $8 million a year was worth it when you could get somebody like Austin Eckler from the Chargers, who's a great receiver out of the backfield, arguably a better receiver out of the backfield than DeAndre Swift, a little bit older, but still signed for $4 million a year, like half the price. 2 years, $8.3 million is what Swift signed with the Chargers. I mean, is what Eckler signed to go from the Chargers to the Commanders. Like again, this is not about Eckler specifically, but it's like, okay, you want a pass catching back. What we need is a pass catching third down back who can line up at receiver and do things that these other running backs can't. That sounds like Austin Eckler to a T, and you could still have great rushing from Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson and have all these guys have good roles. But now it feels like either you have to play Swift a ton and have him do everything and then underutilize the talent that you have in Herbert and Roschon Johnson, or underutilize Swift, who you're paying $8 million a year to still find enough roles for Herbert and Roschon Johnson to get some carries, and Roschon should play some third downs too because he can catch the ball and he can pass protect out of the backfield. So I'm again left feeling like, okay, excited about what DeAndre Swift can do as a receiver out of this backfield and a good runner. Like he's a good football player who adds to this offense, and I'm still left wondering if that's the best utilization of the talent, the cap space, and how they're going to make it work with all these running backs. Certainly willing to give Shane Waldron, Matt Eberflus, Thomas Brown, the offensive staff, like they get a chance to show how they're going to use it. They get a benefit of the doubt here and say, okay, like let's see what this backfield looks like and how they make this work. And if this is a well-oiled rushing attack with a bunch of different options of who you can hand it off to, and the defense has trouble keeping up with all the backs out of the backfield, and then you also have a dynamic pass catching trio out of the backfield, and like you get the guys involved, like there is a pathway where you can kind of make this work. It just doesn't feel like to me like the best utilization of all the assets the Bears had here. But we can still be excited for it and look forward to how they're going to be able to use them and give them the room to be creative and find ways to use it. But Shane Waldron has not been much of a backfield type, at the same time at least. You'll rotate guys, but you're not going to get Roschon and Swift in the backfield at the same time a ton. That's not something that Waldron has done a ton. So it's a lot of guys taking turns, and maybe Swift will play some receiver, and that's valuable, but could you have had those resources go elsewhere? Let's see what they're able to do with Swift. But certainly, I think there's some excitement there about what he can do that Herbert and Roschon Johnson cannot, and that will be valuable and important to this Bears offense through and through. Maybe we'll get a peek at that in training camp when we start to really get more of a holistic look at what this offense is going to be. Maybe we won't see that all directly on Hard Knocks, but if you get out to training camp in person, you can see it for yourself. But I'm looking forward to Hard Knocks, and the Bears are, I think, begrudgingly embracing it because now they don't have a choice. But Matt Eberflus has some pretty good perspective on being televised like that through training camp, and I think the way he's approaching it speaks well to why this still won't be that big of a deal for these Bears players, and why, okay, they can be upset about it and huff and puff about it, but it should be fine in the long run. So we'll kind of hear what the Bears are doing to prepare for that and how they're approaching Hard Knocks this year next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Gametime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. Whether it's tickets to a Bears game this season, as you look on this schedule and want to get a great deal on tickets, Gametime is a great place to do it because they have all-in pricing, so you're not getting any added fees at the end that make your tickets way more expensive than you thought they'd be. And you can see your view from your seat, so you know exactly what you're going to get in Soldier Field or whatever venue you're going to see your show. Because it's not just the Bears. It's sports of all kinds, but also concerts, theater shows, comedy. I mean, you name it. If there's a live event in your area, you can find tickets on Gametime. And they got some great last-minute ticket deals as well. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account using our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Really appreciate everyone tuning in to Locked On Bears. We talked a little bit last week about Hard Knocks, and now we finally get some reaction from the Bears themselves, the players and coaches, talking about Hard Knocks. Hard Knocks is definitely going to be a fun way to keep up with this team. It's always a lot more excitement to watch for when you get to a little bit of extra action. Hey, if you're looking for what else to watch besides Hard Knocks, besides the Locked On Bears podcast, don't forget to check out the Locked On Sports 24/7 live stream on YouTube or our free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's programmed every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming and argument television that you get on Fox Sports and ESPN. So check it out 24 hours a day on YouTube or Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You know we'll be breaking down Hard Knocks for you all training camp long. We know that the Bears weren't super thrilled about it, had been resisting it for a long time, but were now forced into it by the league and HBO and all that. And so they have no choice but to, I guess they don't have to embrace it, but to at least go along with it and they have no choice but to make the most out of it, right? I guess there's a difference between fully embracing it and just trying to make the most out of it and live with it. And they're definitely prepared for this because, well, the Bears haven't been on Hard Knocks before. Coaches and players on this organization have been part of Hard Knocks before, including your head coach, Matt Eberflus, when the Indianapolis Colts were part of Hard Knocks in, I think, 2021, when Eberflus was defensive coordinator. DeAndre Swift was on Hard Knocks with the Detroit Lions. I mean, there are other veterans on this team that have been in training camps that have been televised by Hard Knocks and HBO. So it's not like no one around the team has any idea what to expect, and there are going to be these pitfalls to that, oh, we didn't realize this, or we didn't realize that, we shouldn't have said that, or that cameras were going to be following this, or create this or that kind of distraction, or whatever it's going to be. Like we talked on Friday's podcast about how the idea of it being a distraction is definitely way overblown. And I think Eberflus, given his experience with it, not as a head coach, but as a defensive coordinator, still is putting him in a position to give this team good perspective where it's like, okay, we can be excited about this, but also like not let it really change anything for any of us.
So, I was the defensive coordinator at the time, and really it's the same message. We had a real positive attitude about it, and we know that we had good people in the building, and our message was going to be, who we are and how we operate. And it's no one changes how they act, no one changes what they do. We just focus on our job, and they're going to have the special interest stories that they do, which I think some of them are pretty good, with different things. And we have a lot of them, here in this building. So I'm excited about seeing that.
That is an extension of that. Just given the experience you had there, are there things that you noted that you want to be mindful of with an extra presence here in the building and just trying to manage that for the group collectively?
Yeah, you always got to have some, you have some hard conversations sometimes, in the building, and those have to be done in private. And what's nice about it is we have a great plan in place for that. Everybody who goes on Hard Knocks has editing rights to what goes in and out and all those things, and that's standard. But yeah, we have a good plan.
I'm not sure there's any other way they should approach it. Like, yeah, be yourself and don't try and act different or, and I think that's in multiple directions, right? You don't act up, like you're trying to put on a show for the camera, but you also don't have to like hide yourself and act down and like try and, not embrace who you are and just kind of like mind your business and don't say anything, don't move anything. Like the Bears have personalities on their team naturally that already are the way they are and are fun and exciting and easy to root for and all that stuff. Like they can just let that speak for itself, and that will produce on its own compelling television for Hard Knocks. And I think this is such the right mix because it's like, okay, if you try really hard to not give HBO anything, it's like, okay, we're going to all show no personality on camera. We're not going to give them any drama. We're all just going to be straight-laced, boring, rehearsed robot athletes that all say the same thing. Like if you try and do that, great, okay, maybe you prevent some kind of, I don't know, distraction or something. But if you do that, HBO is still going to try and find a way to make drama and compelling, interesting stories. And I'm certainly not here to like accuse them of crafting narratives or anything like that, but like they may have to try harder to pull out things that will be more interesting that way. Whereas if you just are a team that already has personality in a way that they already manage and is already like not a problem and it's just fun, like that will be enough where HBO can naturally just pull what you give them by being yourself, and like it won't create any extra drama or any extra storylines or anything like that. Like it'll just be what already exists around the team as is, that, you know, this player is goofy or this player tells bad jokes or this player is, you know, whatever the storylines are going to be, right? Like just let those naturally happen so then HBO doesn't have to go digging for them somewhere else. You're just presenting that to them naturally. And of course, you don't want players going over the top either because that can just kind of be a distraction at that point. So I playing this down the middle is definitely the way to go. And then Eberflus kind of dismounted there on the biggest point of them all, where it's like the Bears get editing power over this. Like they're not going to literally, like Ryan Poles is not going to sit down and edit clips for them, but like HBO will present stuff to the Bears and the Bears can veto stuff and say, actually, no, we don't want that on the show, and make sure that nothing then goes to air for us to all watch that the Bears haven't given some level of thumbs up approval to. So there's not really a ton of risk there. Like at worst, it's annoying. Okay, it's an extra thing to think about and for the team to have to sort of manage and check over, and, you know, security clearance and, you know, who's in and around the building and stuff. Like, sure, there's a maybe a hassle or something that comes with it. I'll absolutely give them that. Like, I don't think the Bears should be over here trying to be on Hard Knocks every single season by any means. But like, once you're forced into it and there's nothing you can do about it, embrace it. Have fun with it. Like, let this be fun access for the fan base. Build some energy and excitement around this team. Like, it certainly can help. Not necessarily help them win games, I guess, but like it can be a benefit. It can be something that's fun and endearing. And honestly, like we've heard Bears players talk about, like they watch Hard Knocks. Other players around the NFL watch Hard Knocks, and if they see, you know, your coaching staff being a great coaching staff or your organization having a great culture, like it's an advertisement to the rest of the NFL to say, hey, if you're a free agent, you should come play for us. Maybe you should take less money to come play for us because this is a good team, this is a fun team, this is a good coaching staff. I mean, whatever it might be. I think we saw some aspect of that with the Detroit Lions a couple of years ago when they were on Hard Knocks, where it was like the Lions had such this reputation of the losers that nobody wants to play for, with bad coaches, bad front office, bad ownership. Like everything sucked in Detroit. It was terrible to be a Lions fan. And Hard Knocks brought us into Dan Campbell and introduced us to like some of the players in that team. And like, that's not the reason they were successful, but it did help change the perception of what the Detroit Lions were. And then, of course, winning football games and getting into the playoffs and stuff goes a long way too. But like Hard Knocks really planted the seed for that. And then they took advantage of that by winning. If they had kept losing, sure, maybe it doesn't have the same effect, but I think it lubricates that process a little bit, helps get that off the ground and says, all right, like maybe people can start to fall in love with the Chicago Bears a little bit more nationally. And then if they also start winning games, then all of a sudden it changes the reputation of the franchise on a national scale. And that's better for at the very least, all of us who have to hear all the national narratives about the Chicago Bears and anyone, I mean, especially the kind of things Packer fans say, although I don't think you're really going to change those either. But the point being, like, there's some benefit here that comes with doing Hard Knocks well and then taking advantage of that by also going on and winning some football games. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. We're not going to spend too much time the rest of this offseason talking about Hard Knocks, but we'll dedicate a podcast episode every week to what we learned from each Hard Knocks episode throughout Bears training camp. So to keep up with all of our offseason updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll be here for you throughout the offseason, so keep coming back for your daily Bears fix. And of course, I always want you to come back for your next opportunity to bear down.